I never imagined grief could come with so much noise, not from crying, but from whispers, from the murmurs crawling across the mahogany pews of the funeral home like vines of judgment. My father had passed 2 days ago, and already my family had turned his death into a public performance, the kind where everyone wore black but showed their true colors anyway. Please subscribe to our channel and tell us in comments from where are you watching this video. I stood near the front of the chapel, silent, hands trembling around the photo I had chosen for the service. Dad standing beside his old fishing boat, smiling like a man who had earned peace. He wasn't a perfect father, but he was my anchor, the only one who ever really made me feel seen. My older sister Madison arrived 15 minutes late, wearing a designer coat that screamed, "Fashion Week," more than "Farewell, Dad." She didn't cry, she didn't look sad. She didn't even glance at the photo I had set up. She breezed past me like I was a stranger and loudly said to her fiancé, "Let's just get through this so we can find out what he left us." Those words stung more than I was willing to admit. I blinked, stunned, watching people around us pretend not to hear her. I could hear Dad's voice in my memory. "People show you who they are when there's money on the table. Watch who leans in." I didn't want to lean in. I didn't want to believe she could be so cold. But she kept proving it, one careless smirk at a condolence, one exaggerated yawn during the eulogy. She whispered to her fiancé again. He better have left something real. I wasted a whole weekend for this. I couldn't take it anymore. I stood and walked outside just to breathe. The funeral director followed, offering a gentle word. "You doing okay?" he asked. I nodded, lying. "Yeah, just need a minute." He waited, hesitated, then added, "I don't usually say this, but your dad was a good man. Quiet, but he always talked about you." That broke me. Right there in the parking lot, mascara running, heart split wide open, I let the grief in. Madison hadn't asked how I was doing. No one from her side had. My father's body wasn't even buried yet, and all she wanted was the inheritance. And it got worse. At the small family gathering after the service, she clinked her wine glass and said, "Okay, everyone, can we cut the sad stuff and get to the will? I'm starving and tired, and honestly, he wasn't even around that much." Silence. My jaw clenched. My aunt gasped. My grandmother quietly excused herself to the bathroom. I felt a heat crawl up my neck, but I didn't say anything. Not yet. Because I knew something Madison didn't. Dad had rewritten his will last year, and I was the only one who knew why. A few months ago, he had called me into his hospital room. He wasn't doing great then. Tubes, machines, the whole sterile orchestra of dying slowly. He asked me to sit beside him and said, "You know your sister? She only comes when there's money. But you came when all I had was pain. I want you to remember this moment because someday it'll all be yours." At the time, I thought he meant memories, a final fatherly line to comfort me in the dark. But a week before his death, his lawyer called me. Your father updated everything. He wanted to ensure the right person carried his legacy. That day had arrived. Tomorrow, the will would be read in his lawyer's office. Madison didn't know it yet, but her smug smile was already on borrowed time. And I, his invisible daughter, his afterthought in family photos, was about to become the executor of everything he left behind. The silence wouldn't last forever. The truth was coming. The next morning, I stood outside the law firm with a knot in my stomach and a folder clutched tightly in my hand. Inside were all the documents my father had entrusted me with. Old bank statements, letters, a sealed envelope labeled "For Madison," only if she asks, and a photo of the two of us fishing when I was 12. A memory he said he carried everywhere in his wallet until the day he passed. The parking lot slowly filled up. Madison pulled in late again, parking diagonally across 2 spaces like she always did, like the world should shift for her convenience. She stepped out wearing oversized sunglasses and sipping a cold brew, not a trace of mourning on her face. Her fiancé trailed behind her, half asleep, mumbling something about brunch reservations. "Finally," Madison groaned when she saw me. "Can we get this over with?" "I have a mani-pedi in an hour." I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. We entered the firm's conference room, polished wood, leather chairs, quiet as a chapel. Mr. Ellison, our family's longtime attorney, stood at the head of the table. He gave me a small nod before beginning. "I know today isn't easy," he said, "but your father was clear about how he wanted this handled. There are no copies being sent out. Everything will be read here, aloud, as per his request." Madison rolled her eyes. Dramatic as always. Typical Dad. Mr. Ellison continued, his voice calm but unwavering. "This will is dated exactly 9 months ago. It supersedes all previous versions, and it begins with this message, which your father insisted I read word for word." He picked up a handwritten letter and began, "If you're hearing this, then I've left this world, and I hope I left it a little better by making this decision. I spent too many years watching my daughters grow apart. One treated my home like a vending machine. The other treated it like a duty. But only one showed up when I was sick. Only one called without asking for something, and only one sat beside me when the pain made me question if life was still worth living." I saw Madison's smirk twitch at the edges. Her fingers tightened around her phone. "Madison," Mr. Ellison continued, reading from the letter, "you were always the star. The one in the spotlight. The one your mother and I placed too many hopes on. And perhaps that made us blind. But in my final months, the truth became unavoidable. You visited once, stayed 10 minutes. You asked about the house, not my health. Then you left early to catch a flight to Mexico." Madison gasped. "That's not fair. I had obligations. Mr. Ellison held up a hand. "You'll have a chance to speak after, but your father's letter is not finished." "Emily," he read, turning toward me, "you were never loud. But you were always present, and in the silence of pain, presence speaks loudest. You were my nurse, my chauffeur, my daughter, and my peace. That's why I've made the following decisions." The room stilled. Even the air paused to listen. To Madison, I leave my wristwatch, the one she admired when she visited the hospital. I hope it reminds her that time is precious, and not guaranteed. Madison let out a short laugh. "You're joking. A watch?" To Emily, Mr. Ellison continued, "I leave my house, my savings, my investments, and the lake cabin where I taught you how to bait a hook. You already know where the documents are." I looked down at my folder, trying not to cry. I wasn't shocked. Dad had prepared me. But hearing it spoken aloud, like final proof that I hadn't just imagined our bond, cracked something deep inside. Madison shot up from her seat, voice sharp. "This is insane! He must have been manipulated. He was sick. You poisoned his mind." Mr. Ellison calmly handed her the sealed envelope I had brought. "He wrote you a letter, Madison. He said to only give it to you if you questioned his decision." She snatched it with shaking hands, tore it open, and scanned the contents. Her face changed, confusion first, then embarrassment, then pale rage. He wrote this? Seriously?" I could see tears welling up in her eyes. She was losing control. But I knew my father had given her more than she deserved. He gave her truth. She slammed the letter down. "So what now? You get everything? You, the quiet one who always played second fiddle?" I stood slowly and said the words I had rehearsed for months. "No, Madison, I was never second. I was just never loud enough for you to notice." She scoffed. "Whatever, you're nothing without his money." I smiled softly. "That's what you never understood. He gave me everything before he gave me anything." She stormed out, slamming the door, leaving her fiancé behind, looking awkward and unsure. He muttered an apology and followed her. Mr. Ellison leaned back in his chair. "Your father was right about you, Emily." I nodded, holding back tears. But what no one in that room knew, not Madison, not even Mr. Ellison, was that I wasn't just inheriting my father's money. I was going to use it. And what I planned to do next would ensure that Madison's name would never again be spoken without remembering the sister she dismissed and the empire she could never touch. 3 months later, the lake cabin was quiet. still scented with pine wood and old cigar smoke, the way Dad had left it. I stood by the window, watching the ripples on the water. In one hand, I held a glass of red wine. In the other, I held a signed contract. I'd just sold one of Dad's oldest investment properties for triple its value. I wasn't selling out. I was building something. Something bigger than revenge. Something Dad would have been proud of. And it started today. The funeral, the will reading, and Madison's tantrum had all gone viral online. I never posted anything myself. But somehow, a lawyer's assistant had leaked part of the reading and someone had filmed Madison screaming in the parking lot. She got a whole estate? I got a watch? That clip got over 3 million views in a week. People called it the most satisfying inheritance ever. Madison disappeared from social media for a while. But I didn't. I quietly launched a foundation in my father's name, the Henry Aldridge Trust. It offered grants to caregivers who had sacrificed their careers to take care of family. I poured half the inheritance into it. The rest? I turned into property. Apartments for low-income women, a scholarship fund for quiet daughters no one believed in. I invested in my own startup, something I'd buried for years because my parents said it would never amount to anything. But I hadn't forgotten what happened at the reunion. The day Dad was lowered into the ground, our family held a celebration of life at the same hotel we'd used for reunions since I was a kid. That was the first time I realized what people really thought of me. My uncle introduced me as the one who didn't go very far. My aunt asked if I was still working part-time. Madison? She didn't speak to me at all. And worst of all, my own father had stood in that banquet hall just a year earlier, held up his drink and introduced me to distant relatives as the one who never amounted to much, but at least she shows up. I had smiled then, swallowed the shame, but I never forgot. So I bought the hotel, quietly, discreetly, under a holding company name. The next family reunion rolled around. Madison RSVP'd for 3, herself, her new fiancé, and her manager. Apparently, she was trying to be an influencer now, writing the viral clip she once hated. The rest of the family came too. Same voices, same comments. Nobody knew what had changed. Until dessert was served. That's when the head of guest services walked in, whispered in my ear, and I nodded. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, tapping his glass. "We'd like to take a moment to thank our host for tonight's event. Our very own hotel owner, Ms. Emily Aldridge." Silence. Forks stopped mid-air. Glasses froze halfway to lips. Madison actually choked on her champagne. "You own this place?" my cousin stammered. I stood slowly, letting the silence stretch. "Yes, I do. I've owned it for 6 months." Dad's brother muttered, "You bought it?" "I did, after Dad passed," I said calmly. It felt poetic, since I was always the invisible one here. A few nervous laughs, but Madison looked ready to explode. "You're joking. You bought the hotel just to show off?" I turned to her. "Number I bought it so that next time you try to act like you're the star, you'll remember who paid for the spotlight." There was a pause. Then someone started clapping. Then another. And another. Soon, the whole room was applauding. And for the first time in my life, it wasn't out of politeness. It was real. I wasn't the forgotten daughter. I wasn't the quiet one. I wasn't just Emily. I was the owner. Later that night, as guests filed out, Madison walked up to me, her arms crossed. "So what now?" "You just get to be better than me?" I looked her in the eye. "Number, I just stopped letting you decide my worth." She didn't respond. She left without saying goodbye. And I stood there, beneath the chandeliers she once mocked me under, and raised a glass, not to revenge, but to rebirth. To finally being seen. To finally choosing me. The girl they said never amounted to anything. Now the name on the deed, the plaque, and the future. Emily Aldridge, daughter, dreamer, and the quiet storm they never saw coming. Please subscribe to our channel and tell us in comments from where are you watching this video.